Well, folks, we got our second to last Festival of Legends card review, and today it's all Warlock, including this crazy new legendary spell, one of the coolest cards I can remember. It is 6 mana, the Symphony of Sins, and you will discover and play a movement. Shuffle the other 6 into your deck. Well, what the heck is a movement, you ask? Well, I just so happen to have some handy graphics. There are 7 movements corresponding with the 7 deadly sins, of course. So they are each 3 mana when shuffled into your deck, and they have these effects. Summon a 6/6 demon with Taunted Reborn, draw 6 cards, lifesteal, and deal 6 damage to the enemy hero. Give a random minion in your hand, deck, and battlefield +6/+6. Deal 6 damage to all characters. Draw your highest cost minion, reduce its cost by 6, and remove the top 6 cards of your opponent's deck. So some pretty powerful effects, particularly for only 3 mana. Each of these is clearly pretty nutso for 3 mana. Like, draw 6 cards for 3 mana is crazy. I mean, frankly, just a 6/6 with Taunt Reborn for 3 mana is really efficient. And then, you know, there's some really super scary stuff in here, like Movement of Envy, that's just destroying 6 cards from your opponent's deck. We can rejoin that Ticketus debate. Is it good? Is it bad? I can't wait to hear more about that. But in particular, in combination with Rin herself, that can also destroy some of your opponent's cards. You could be wiping out entire decks, essentially, with some of these cards. And then, you know, just damage, like Movement of Desires, deal 6. Movement of Wrath is deal 6, right? So actually some damage output on these as well. Now, you know, of course, getting this rolling, you're going to be spending some mana up front. 6 mana is a lot. But you are getting one of these effects right away because you're discovering and playing that first movement right off the bat. So, you know, some of these will help you stabilize a little bit in exchange for that 6 mana up front. You know, 6 mana, 6/16 with Taunt Reborn. Not exciting for 6 mana. You're not happy to have done that, but it might be just enough to keep you around, you know, keep you in the game a little bit, keep you on board some, so that you don't die while trying to get the rest of these movements, which will then hopefully feel like really powerful, efficient plays for 3 mana each. You know, then you'll start to recover a little bit. So, you know, maybe just deal 6, heal up a little bit if the board's not too crazy. Maybe you get a nice deal 6 to all characters to reset the board, get a board wipe, and hopefully that buys you the time to get things moving. And presumably you're playing this, you know, in a pretty control-y, grindy sort of deck that has other life gain and defensive tools that help you stabilize before and perhaps after the Symphony of Sin, so that you can start to draw through these and then make those crazy power plays with like 2 of these in a turn, this plus something else awesome, etc. Now, of course, there are some of these that aren't great on board right away. So you may unfortunately low roll and get a choice of 3 cards that don't do much right now. So, you know, if you want to play this on turn 6, for instance, maybe you just get remove the top 6 cards from your opponent's deck. Doesn't affect the board at all. Movement of Gluttony only affects the board if you have a minion, but if you're playing from behind, you probably don't. So doesn't affect the board. And then you get like draw 6 cards, which again is super crazy nice and efficient, but on turn 6 those aren't going to be useful for you yet. So you know, you might get 3 options basically that don't allow you to stabilize a little bit. So there are going to be some moments and some risks here to playing the Symphony of Sins where it feels like, ah, crap, I'm just going to die. This was not the right turn to play this, but hopefully if the deck is structured well and you recognize the risks at the right moments, maybe you just hold off on the Symphony of Sins, play something else instead. You're a control deck. Hopefully that's not too big of a pivot or a problem, and I don't suspect it will be, because there will certainly be matchups and moments where this does feel insane and perfect, and if you just time it well, I think that's going to be okay. So yeah, I think this card looks awesome from a design standpoint, like really cool. Super flavorful, awesome for Rin, and I also think it looks like it has some power too. I think this is going to be a solid card for any kind of slower Warlock deck. So really, they kind of knocked it out of the park on this one. I think it's really, really well done. So next up, the freshest reveals here for Warlock are this new Fatigue archetype, and we've got a few of them. There's Crescendo. The word's hard to say. Baritone Imp also is going to allow you to take Fatigue and get a bonus. Crazed Conductor, you take fatigue and get a bonus. And then the Fell String Harp, whenever your hero would take damage, instead you're going to get health. So instead of taking some of these big fatigue hits, you might actually be able to deny that and gain life instead. So basically 3 ways to take fatigue damage and then be rewarded, 1 way to deny said damage. Also, remember, we got the 1-drop tease earlier in the expansion that makes you immune on your own turn. So that's another way to potentially avoid some of the fatigue damage here you might otherwise take. And this is a pretty cool archetype. So let's kick it off with Crescendo. I think... Am I saying that right? Who knows? This is, I think, going to be the most powerful of these cards. It's a 3-mana Fell spell. It makes you take fatigue damage. So if that's the first card you play, for instance, you're going to take 1, right? And then each additional one of these that requires you to take fatigue damage is going to increment that number upwards. So you go from 1 to 2 to 3, etc., just like fatigue damage normal. So, you know, the idea is play like a couple baritone imps early and then a Crazed Conductor, you know, then you've gone your fatigue up by 3, then you drop the Crescendo and it's going to be like more face damage, you know, a board clear potentially, really efficient for 3. And then also if you're burning through your deck, if you're drawing a ton of cards and you're naturally just getting to your own fatigue and taking it up via fatigue draws, there might be scenarios where, you know, you have a movement of greed in hand, you play the guy that makes you immune on your turn, you play the movement of greed, you draw up to some crazy fatigue total, and then you drop this card so that you're dealing like 10 plus to the board and your opponent's face or whatever, and it becomes this kind of lethal combo finisher and not just, you know, a board clear effectively. Since this hits all enemies, it does go face. So you have the makings here of a pretty interesting package that's encouraging you to draw through your deck really rapidly and then turn that fatigue into face damage. It's actually very reminiscent of the Stormwind quest for Warlock that was crazy busted. Now, that created an even more universal win condition through the quest reward, because when you played Tamsin, you didn't need to like set it up so much. It was just done, and then you could just draw like crazy, do whatever you wanted. All of your fatigue damage was hitting your opponent's face. This requires a little bit more calculation and manipulation because you have to set it up. You have to play the cards to enact it, not just like hero power yourself to death or whatever. So although hero power drawing will support this, but again, you have to time it right and you have to play it with certain things on board to make sure you don't die. So that required setup in kind of getting the quest done. This requires setup by having the right kind of cards in hand. I don't think this will be as universal or as powerful as the quest line was, which is a good thing because that sucked to play against. That was crazy oppressive. I think this is a more reasonable version of that sort of design, turning fatigue damage into face damage, but still seems like it actually packs quite a punch. And this is the reason this deck would be successful, I think, because this seems like it's crazy efficient. Because you're going to have like one of these, maybe you play kind of middle of the way through, clean up the board, going to start doing some awesome stuff, then maybe save one for later to do crazy big damage and finish the opponent off. Now, along the way, you're going to have the Baritone Imp here. This is a 2-mana 2/2 demon. It's also an imp, keep in mind. So this actually has some imp synergies. And remember, we have crazy imp card draw as well. So you can maybe build this with an imp deck, kind of play some Zooey imp stuff. And much like imp decks have been using curses in order to advance the curse game plan, maybe now you have kind of this fatigue game plan as a backup instead. So you have an imp deck, and then you just blow your opponent up with fatigue cards. The Baritone Imp in particular, he's going to gain attack and health equal to that fatigue damage. So I think very often this might be like the first one you take fatigue through. So he's going to gain like +1/+1, you know. Maybe the next one gains +2/+2. So you're talking about a 2-mana 3/3, 2-mana 4/4, etc., which is absolutely fine. You know, it's good enough play early. It's actually overstated a little bit. Maybe not the most exciting effect otherwise, but gets things rolling, keeps you on board, allows you to maintain some early pressure while still setting up for later, right? Which is exactly what you want. It's the building blocks to the late game plan. And then if you do happen to draw this a little later, you know, sometimes this might be like an 8/8 or something. You just splash an 8/8 on board. You're like, yeah, okay, that's a nice bonus. I hit it late, but it kind of scales with the game plan. So it catches up as you get later into the game, whereas normally a 2-drop might fall off. I don't think it'll fall off that hard. It's like a Sea Giant or something almost. You just splash down really cheaply and create this monster threat on top of the rest of everything else you're doing. So this looks like a great way to support the fatigue plan. So next up here is the Crazed Conductor. This is a 5-mana 4/5, and same thing, Battlecry, take fatigue damage, and then summon that many 3/3 imps. So again, this is a wide board builder. And again, this ties in with the imp synergies, so you can start to see all of this coming together. This is very often going to be a 4/5 that summons 2, 3, 4 imps or something perhaps by this stage, which is great. That's a nice little board builder that again supports the game plan. It advances your end game win condition as well with all of this fatigue stuff. So this looks like another really solid option for this stack. And it's a 4/5/2 at a base, which is a pretty good stat line for this much upside. I was a little bit surprised by that. Now, you know, the elephant in the room we haven't talked about yet is, are you going to be able to survive through all of this? I wanted to introduce the cards in the game plan, but we gotta circle back here. Are you going to be able to live when you're taking all of this fatigue damage? You have to be able to keep up on board and make sure you're not taking a bunch of extra chip damage on top of this fatigue damage, or you might just fall too far behind in life, be susceptible to burst damage, small boards just wiping you out and killing you if your opponent's able to kind of turn the corner on all of this damage that you've softened yourself up through. Now, that's where this card comes in. This is the Fellstring Harp. We also, as we saw that 1-drop earlier, I should probably just pull that guy up as a reminder. So there are a couple different ways for you to deny the damage, and I think they are both pretty affordable, which is important. I think if you had to spend a lot of mana protecting yourself as opposed to a lot of mana setting yourself up, that might be a problem. But here's the Void Virtuoso. During your turn, your hero is immune. That's awesome, right? That's great, because that's exactly the sort of thing here that's going to protect you from taking all of this damage alongside the Fellstring Harp. I think the Fellstring Harp's a little less exciting, but the good news with this one is you can set it up in advance, whereas with the Virtuoso you kind of need to play it on the same turn, which won't be hard because it's only 1 mana, but you can set this up kind of a turn early and then pop a couple of these cards and still feel pretty safe about it. And not only does this deny you taking the fatigue damage, but it also recovers you life on top of that. So this actually helps you gain some of that life back from cards from damage you might have taken earlier instead. So it's both an instead effect, which denies the damage, and restore 2 health. I want to point out that word particularly. So I don't know, man. I think this package looks pretty cool. I think all these cards do a great job to support this game plan pretty well, and I think it looks like this might be a great complementary package for deck structures and builds that we've already seen working pretty well in Hearthstone, and that's usually a great sign for their success. This is going to be a really boring quick reviews because Symphony of Sins is a 4-star card. Crescendo is a 4-star card. Baritone Imp is a 4-star card. Crazed Conductor is a 4-star card. Fellstring Harp is a 4-star card. And there you go, folks. That wraps it up for this particular review. Curious if you guys like all these cards as much as I do. I think these are both really fun looking, flavorful, and I think have the potential to be really good as well. So man, 1 review left to go. It's been a quick, fun reveal season. Curious as always to hear your thoughts down in the comments below. Thanks much for watching, and until next time, game on.